The Phoenix Suns are down 0-2 to the Denver Nuggets, and they have been losing to an extreme degree, losing by an average of 14 points a game between these two games. So they're getting destroyed. As for why, well, it comes down to math. Let me explain why. The biggest problem by far with the Phoenix Suns comes down to the mathematical problem of the mid-range shot. Through these first two games, the Phoenix Suns have only made 3 less field goals than the Denver Nuggets have, hitting 80. 1 to Denver's 84. Averaging that out to 1.5 less made shots a game. You wouldn't think that Denver would be outscoring them by 14 more points per game, but they are. To be fair, they're also getting to the free throw line a little bit more. Denver has shot 14 more free throws over these two games, which obviously averages out to 7. I'm not very good at math, but I can divide 14 by 2. And this is while both teams are both shooting roughly 85 from the free throw line. But also, to be even more fair, that free throw difference is a byproduct of this exact problem. So it doesn't really negate my point. If anything, it enhances it. The Nuggets in the first two games attempted 10 more threes than the Suns, while also shooting 10 better. They also attempted a lot more shots in the paint. Now, Denver is not shooting extraordinarily well from 3. They're shooting just 36, but Phoenix is shooting even 10 worse than that. They've been shooting very bad from outside. For Phoenix, 24 of their points in this series have come from mid-range shots. Meanwhile, Denver is getting just 12 of their points from there. And more importantly, despite the fact that only a quarter of the actual points Phoenix have scored has come from mid-range, even with it leading to such low returns, the Phoenix Suns are shooting 50 of their shots from there. Now, this does make sense to some degree. Kevin Durant and Chris Paul are 2 of the 10 best mid-range shooters of all time. I'd even personally proclaim Kevin Durant as the GOAT in that particular aspect of scoring. And while Devin Booker doesn't have the all-time mid-range resume that Durant and Chris Paul do, he's also an excellent mid-range shooter and will go down as one of the best of all time in that category. So if you have 3 players who are really, really excellent at something, it only makes sense that that something would happen a lot. But that's kind of the issue. There's an overabundance of mid-range shooting with this team. There's more than any team really ever needs. The 2 most efficient shots in basketball in order are shots of the paint and shots from outside the arc. The average mid-range percentage in the NBA this year was 30-80, which amounts to 0.76 points per shot attempt, which is very, very low, in case you didn't know. Meanwhile, the average three-point percentage of 35.5% amounts to 1.7 points per shot. And the average rim percentage of 66.5 amounts to 1.33 points per shot. And that is not even counting the fact that you are way more likely to go to the free throw line for a shot in the paint than anywhere else. So that's what I was talking about earlier with Denver's free throw attempts. It's a byproduct of the fact that they are not only shooting mid-range shots. Even if you have historically good mid-range shooters, which the Phoenix Suns do, let's say, because of that as a team, they shoot 50 from mid-range. To be clear, they're not doing that. They're not. It's a very high bar to actually achieve. But let's just say, for the sake of argument, they have been that scorching hot from mid-range. If they shot 50 from mid-range, that still only results in 1 point per shot attempt, which is less than threes and shots in the paint. Therefore, the team shooting way more of the 2 most efficient shots is outscoring them. Team taking way more of the least efficient shot. Now, this is not me advocating for the notion that mid-range shooting is bad and has no place in the league and people shouldn't attempt them. I grew up watching Kobe Bryant. The reason I fell in love with basketball was his mid-range shooting ability specifically. I think it is easily the closest thing to an art form that exists within the sport. So I do super value it, but it has its place as a fallback option at this point in the league, not a primary source of offense. It obviously has its place. The Nuggets, as I said, have scored 12 of their points from mid-range. It's not as though they cut it out entirely, but what they didn't do, unlike Phoenix, was make it foundational to the success of their offense. This is the same issue the Chicago Bulls had this season. DeMar DeRozan and Zach LaVine and Nikola Vucevic all shoot a steady volume of mid-range shots while not shooting threes really at all by comparison to the rest of the league. And they also have a fairly mediocre rim presence. They hit more mid-range shots than anyone this year, and they were 26th in offense. So it didn't really work. regardless of whether or not you personally enjoy less mid-range shooting in basketball. Regardless of how you feel about that, just from a pure aesthetic standpoint, as I do, it is objectively the case that the math doesn't work out for that to be the shot your offense is built around. It just doesn't. Even historically, good mid-range shooting is less effective than average paint and three-point scoring. As for how Phoenix can address this issue, well, I would say they tried to after Game 1. They still shot 50 of their shots from mid-range, but they also shot more threes and they didn't Game 1. Durant and Booker combined took 20. They didn't hit them. So just simply having them shoot regular percentage from three again would definitely boost their offense significantly. The fact that they have shot 25 from three has definitely made the math even less in their favor. But overall, the volume still needs to increase. And frankly, I feel like this is something that's going to have to be addressed in the offseason. They're going to have to find players who, within the flow of the offense, are going to shoot a ton of threes. Meanwhile, Booker and Durant are getting their stuff off from there. I also feel as though Chris Paul is quickly losing his relevance to this team, while his playmaking and lack of stagnation offensively that Booker and Durant can sometimes fall into is definitely worthwhile and impactful. He's not a good three-point shooter. He hasn't been for the last 2 years, really, and his mid-range shot isn't that reliable. While he's still taking a ton of them, I think Booker and Durant, that's all the mid-range shooting a team should really ever ask for. And anything more than that is living in excess. So it might not be easy to move him given the money and his age and injury history and all that. But if you could just find a point guard who's going to hit his threes, find a wing who's just going to hit his threes, like Torrey Craig has, he could just be the answer there. You just need more from outside. You also need to attack the paint more. And to some extent, you can blame that on DeAndre Ayton for the fact that he's just not that aggressive. But I also feel as though Phoenix's offense could make a more deliberate effort to involve him because he's definitely the best paint scorer they have. But as long as a contested mid-range shot is the shot that Phoenix is looking for, the shot that they're happy with, they're not going to win. They just aren't because the math isn't on their side, and basketball is not a pure math equation. But if you play the margins to this extreme, it becomes that, and it has been,